Hello watercolorists, this is Ela, and I am going to show you how to do a value study using glazing technique. So what do I mean by value study? I mean you want to have a range of different values going from light to dark, and we're going to build them up. You see how we have white in this picture here. We have light grays, and then we have a medium gray, and then we have a black. So that's what I mean by a range of values going from light to dark, one color, and we're going to build each color on top of the previous lighter layer. So I know this is a lot to take in. First thing I need to do is just find a picture I want to copy, and I'm going to do an even simpler version of it. So I'm trying to do something that isn't too intimidating. You're going to have a more interesting picture, even if it is colorful, if you include light areas, dark areas, and areas that are somewhere in between. Is I need to figure out what color do I want to make this picture, because I'm only going to use one color. So I have a very limited palette here. I've got a red, I've got a blue, and I have a yellow. And already I've got some ideas. I have my water and my water dropper right here. And I'm going to put some water on each of these. And this is Transparent Yellow by Van Gogh. And the problem with this color and many yellows is that they're just really light. I can't get a dark. No matter how concentrated I go, this will still be a light color. So the next question is, okay, what about these other two? And if you have lots of colors, then you have lots of colors to choose from, but I'm presuming that you don't have a lot of colors yet. So this is quinacridone Rose, and I have more range here. And this will lighten up as it dries as well. So I could do the painting in that color, because I can make it this strong, or I can make it paler. Right, I just added more water to it. I have a very pale color now. And so I have some range in there. If I really want to have a lot of range, I would go for a very dark color. So this is ultramarine blue. This is a dark color. It's not quite, when it's dry on my palette, it looks black. When I get it wet, it shows up as blue. But this is a really excellent color for this exercise. So I think I'm going to go with ultramarine blue. So the very, very first thing I need to do after choosing my color, which is going to be ultramarine blue, is I need to make some different values. So I'm soaking up water into my dropper, and I'm putting it in my palette. I'm putting it in my big area. One of the biggest challenges that people often face when they're painting with watercolor is they underestimate how much paint they need. We're making this the exact concentration that we need for our picture. So, okay, I've got all this water here. I'm going to take just a tiny bit of that ultramarine blue. I'm going to stir it around. And that is not the concentration of this paint. We don't know what that concentration is. You only find out by swatching, and you can see that hardly shows up at all. So I'm going to add more. And now I can stir it around. What does that look like? Do another swatch. That's looking like a pale blue. That's pretty good. It's going to dry even lighter than that. And it's also a good idea to go, okay, what part of this picture do I want to make pale blue? Do I want it to do the same as here, or do I want to mix it up? I don't know. I should probably do the same as here, just so I don't get too confused. So I'm gonna do something, maybe part of those leaves. And if I wanted to, I could do everything that's going to be darker. I can put a pale wash on it. Let's do that. This is called an underpainting. I'm getting to show you another thing. If I'm going to do an underpainting, I want to make a lot of very pale paint. When you paint with watercolor, you always go from light to dark. The first layer is the lightest, and often it's the largest, which is what we're going to do here. And then gradually we get darker and darker, and those darker areas are generally smaller areas. They're more like little highlights, like, the feathers on the bird and the branches. So let's see, that's still a pretty similar color. All right, so I'm going to let the leaves be all, we're going to do everything this pale blue except for some key areas on the bird. And so I'm going to do a large underpainting. So I'm going to tilt my paper up with my left hand so the paint runs off to the right. And I can also just get the whole paper wet beforehand, but I'm just going to show you how this works. All right. So I have to work quickly, and I have to have a lot of paint. I have a lot of paint and I'm working fast, and I'm starting at one end and I'm working my way to the other, and I have to be really careful not to color in anything that I want to keep white. I'm going to let go of a lot of detail in this picture. This is an underpainting because it goes under everything else. So I'm dividing it up between this side. You can see I've got this big juicy area right here. I'm going to abandon it for a while, and I need to make sure that this side is juicy so it doesn't dry out before I'm ready. That's like the biggest battle with watercolor, is making sure that if you want it to be wet, it's really wet, and if you want it to be dry, it's really dry. So we're going through the wet stage. We want a smooth, even underpainting. And I'm using really good paper. I'm using Arches cold press watercolor paper, which is very forgiving for all of the techniques that I'm doing today. So I'm going ahead and I'm just painting around that bird. And I'm going to pick up those little drops of paint, the paper towel. This side is all juicy. Make sure it's juicy before you abandon it. Color in this side. Work fast. Don't talk to a friend. Don't get the mail. Don't use the bathroom. Do this whole thing in hopefully less than a minute if you can. Just go fast. If the air is really dry, if it's a hot day, you have even less time. If it's really humid, if it's raining, then you have a bigger window. But you can see how I did that. And I'm drying this off with a paper towel, and any extra puddles I'm soaking up with my paintbrush, and then I dry my brush off, and then I can, if I need to, I can go in again. So my brush is a sponge. So that's my first layer. So I'm gonna let this dry. I can use a hair dryer, and I want to make sure that it is completely, totally dry. So I'll see you when that's all done. This is totally dry, and now I can put in my second layer. First thing I want to show you is I'm going to stir up this ultramarine blue, which is a granulating color, which means that the pigment is kind of heavy. I'm just going to make this puddle darker right now. Here we go. So it should be pretty easy to make it stronger. Let's go even more. It's beginning to get strong. And I can put it on there. See, that's what it's gonna look like. It's gonna be a little bit darker than this because it has that pale layer underneath. So I think I'm gonna do the background. You know, leave the leaves, leave the bird. I could even leave the branches and just do what's called negative space, which is the space surrounding the objects in the picture. So I'm going to color in the negative space with this particular shade, this particular concentration of blue. And I still have a nice big puddle here. I'm not going to run out anytime soon. And I'm continuing with that same technique as before, where I start at one end. I'm right-handed, so I start at the left, and I just color in from left to right. I'm not jumping around. I have plenty of paint. I don't have any puddles, and I also remember to dip. See how I'm getting paler? Eventually it's going to start like looking like a skid mark if I keep going. So I go in here and I I keep adding more paint to my brush. Normally I wouldn't spread out like that, but I was doing that for demonstration purposes. Trying to get the whole thing evenly wet, evenly concentrated. Keep dipping. Don't be shy about using a fair amount of paint. There, I've colored in the whole thing. And I can see this area right here is a little bit dark. So I'm rinsing out my brush. I like to rinse it out before I wipe it because then it means that I'll have less paint on my paper towel and I'll be able to use it longer. Now I can lift up any extra paint and all that other wet paint just fills it in, but there's less there, less paint there because I soaked it up with my brush. I could even do it over here a little bit maybe. But you only do this when your picture is really wet. If I were to, say, take a really wet brush and start putting it on here, it would push that paint out of the way and I might get a background. I don't want to do that. I like to dry my brush out before I dip it into my paint, because if I put a wet brush full of clear water into my carefully made mix here, I'm going to start diluting that mix. I'm once again starting from left to right. If you're left-handed, you can work from right to left, but I'm just coloring in each section kind of like it was a coloring book. I find that when I get intermediate students, sometimes they're surprised how important it is to practice this stuff. You know, don't forget all this instruction when you decide to do a picture on your own. This is really how I paint all the time. This is why people say watercolor is hard. If you can remember this stuff and practice it until it becomes natural, then it won't be so hard anymore, but you have to get used to it. Okay, that's my second layer, folks. I'll do a little fun stuff here. It is good to remember to play. We're having some playtime. All right, I'm gonna dry this and we will put on our last layer. Woohoo! Let's see what happens if I take this medium color. Let's go in here. I'm getting that gooey paint in my puddle, stirring it around. I want this to be maximum concentration. If I want to do really tiny details, I can use a smaller brush, but I have enough practice. I can use this is a size 10 for this part, but let's see, how dark is this? Maybe even a little bit more. We're going full strength or very, very concentrated. They talk about tea. This would be like tea concentration. This would be like coffee. And we're going for milk. Like beginning to be less transparent and more translucent. I think that's pretty good. So I'm going to go for my darkest areas. So I'm going to give him a dark eye. I could give him a little nostril if I wanted to so he can breathe. I can add details to the leaves if I want to. I'm going to do this branch, really controlling the pressure. Being careful. I could have covered this branch with that second layer, couldn't I? I didn't. There's a lot of possibilities with watercolor. There's not just one way. Getting those bird toes is going to be tricky. I might have to grab a different brush. There we go. I got the bird toes. If this seems too difficult for you, maybe the toes on your bird aren't as spread out as mine. You can keep messing around and adding more and more to your heart's content. Clearly, you have to plan carefully when you do a picture like this. You have to know what you're going to keep white, and what you're going to keep pale, what's going to be kind of your medium tone, and what's going to be your dark tone. You have to figure that all out in advance. All right, I hope you found this helpful. Have fun. I hope you try it out.